Good morning. Today we're going to discuss Lesson 2.2, Solving One-Step Equations. We're going to talk about solving equations using addition or subtraction and multiplication or division. And we're going to deal with a couple of properties. The addition property of equality says if A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. The subtraction property of equality says if A equals B, then A minus C equals B minus C. So we're going to make your life really, really easy. We're going to deal with example number 1 first. Example number 1. And I'm going to work these for you so that you can see everything step by step. So here we go. Example number 1. Example number 1 says m minus 32 equals 18. So we want to solve for the variable n. So when I used to teach 7th grade math, I taught it like this. When I taught pre-algebra, I'd say, let's find the variable, let's put him in a box, let's isolate the variable. So the whole deal here is we're going to isolate the variable and get everything else to the other side. So we want to isolate the variable, get everything else to the other side, then we're going to solve. And I highly recommend that you check your work, even if you do it mentally. Plug it back in to make sure it works. So we have m minus 32 equals 18. Y'all remember, when you're subtracting a number from a variable to move it to the other side, we have to keep the equation balanced. So we do what we call opposite operation. So we're going to add 32 to each side. And when we do, we get m equals what, guys? M equals 50. So there's my answer. This is what I'd like to see in your work. And then to check our work, we can go 50 minus 32 equals 18, and 18 equals 18. It works. Does anybody have a question? Are we good? Okay, you try one. Let me give you a really, really easy one. You ready? You try. H minus 3 equals negative 2. So we're going to isolate our variable, get everything else to the other side. So if you're subtracting, then you would add. If you're adding, you would subtract and solve. So raise your hand if you know what to do and take me step by step. Okay, right here. Thank you.
First thing you do is you have to get rid of the negative 3. But since it's negative, you don't minus it. You plus it to get it to 0.
So you
plus 3, negative 3, and then plus 3 to negative 2, and then you get your answer.
Which is what?
1.
Okay, so what we're doing here is called opposite operation. We have h minus 3 equals negative 2. The opposite of subtraction is addition. Whatever you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other. We need to keep the equation balanced, just like in a scale. When you weigh things in the lab, in science, you have to balance the scale out first and make sure it's at 0. Add 3 to each side, and h equals 1. And then we can check our work. 1 minus 3 equals negative 2. And if the left and right side are equal to each other, that tells you you have solved the problem correctly. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Example number 2. And again, I know it's in your notes, but I always like to work them for you. This is 22 plus p equals negative 12. So here's my variable. My variable is p. So the question is, am I going to add 22 to each side or subtract 22 to each side, from each side? I'm subtracting because there is no minus sign in front of 22, which makes me realize that 22 is positive. So the opposite operation would be subtraction, and I now have p equals negative 34. So please, when you do your homework this evening, again on notebook paper, Please make sure you show your work. Yes, you can use a calculator, but I want to see the steps. I want to make sure you know which way it's moving. Now, to check your work, you are allowed to check it mentally, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what we would do. 22 plus negative 34 is supposed to equal negative 12, and it does, and that tells me I solved it correctly. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay, so let's try this one. We're going to give you 2 to try. We're going to give you one with a fraction and one with a minus a negative. So let's try this one first. M minus a negative 2 equals 10. So this is your original equation. The first thing I would do is what?
Change the subtraction.
I would rewrite it just like you do rewrites in English, because minus a negative is plus a
Positive.
good. So I'll let you guys have a minute and solve that, and then we'll double check it. And what did you all get for an answer? M equals what?
8.
M equals 8 is correct. Does anyone have a question? Okay, you might want your calculators for the next one, because the next one will be fractions. Okay, so it should, I'll just give you another minute as we're solving this. Remember, opposite operation. Take the original equation, isolate your variable, get everything else to the other side. If there's a subtraction sign or a negative sign in front of it, you would add. If there's an addition sign, you would subtract. When someone has an answer, would they raise their hand so I could see if you're correct? Yes, what did you get?
X equals 1.
X equals 1 is correct. We're going to add 3/8 to each side. And we get x equals 8 over 8, which we know is 1. Does anyone have a question? Okay. So let's move on. Again, this is solving one-step equations by using addition or subtraction. The second part of our lesson is solving equations using multiplication or division. If each side of an equation is multiplied by the same non-zero number, the resulting equation is also true. You can use this property to solve equations involving multiplication and division. You can also use the multiplication property of equality and the division property of equality. So let's go ahead and look at our first example here. And I'm going to make sure I do these for you step by step, guys. This is part 2 of our lesson. So let's just go ahead and take a really easy one first. If I said 4x equals 16. So I used this analogy way back when I taught 7th grade mostly, and they thought it was funny. So you might not think it's that funny, but 4 and x are so close. They're actually touching. You know we have a 6-inch rule here at the King's Academy that if you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you were walking that close, that if a teacher sees you, they can come out and actually divide you up or separate you. Okay? So They're that close. 4 and 6 are that close that we can almost say they're kissing. And obviously, no one's going to kiss in front of Mrs. Urso. So I'm going to say you guys need to split up or you need to divide yourself. So what we're going to do is you're going to divide both sides of the equation by what? You divide by whoever is trying to kiss X. And when you do, you get X equals 4. And so you may write this because that might help you. No kissing in math class. Okay, are we good? Yes? Okay, good job. Now let's give you one that's a little bit more detailed. Let's try another easy one. Negative 5n equals 60. Who's kissing n? Are you allowed to kiss at the King's Academy? No. So divide each side by negative 5 and n equals what? 12. Negative 12 is correct. Anybody have a question? Okay, let's do one with a fraction. 3 and 1/2 p equals 1 and 1/2. Okay, so there are two methods. If you're confident with your calculator, yes, you can do it on your calculator. Or you can solve it freehand. It's really totally your choice. So the first thing I always do is I like to always isolate my variable, and I always ask myself this question. What is happening between 3.5 and p? And what would you tell me? 3.5 and p are touching or kissing. So there I come out in the hall. I say, you must divide. So we're going to divide both sides of the equation by 3.5. So you have an option right here to just plug this into your calculator. Or the other option is you can go ahead and do it shorthand and change it to improper fractions, and then remember, multiplying fractions, that's no problem. Top times top and bottom times bottom. Dividing fractions, that's easy too. Divide to multiply and flip it too. So this becomes 3/2 divided by 7/2. Make sure I'm correct, yes? The division sign changes and you flip or take the reciprocal of the second fraction. The 2's cancel out. Is 3/7 the correct answer?
Yes.
Okay, good job. Does everyone know how to do that on their calculator?
Yes.
Okay, so come on up and let me show on your calculator how you would plug in a mixed number. This is for the TI X32S. Mixed numbers. To do a mixed number, do you know how to do it? Okay. To do a mixed number on the calculator, so we are going to type in 1 and 1/2 divided by 3 and 1/2. So you're going to type in 1, then your fraction bar. So that's telling them 1 and then 1 and your fraction bar again, and then 2. Then you're going to hit your division sign. So let's do it on the calculator. 1 and 1/2. And on your calculator, you're going to see something like this. 1, 1, 2. That is telling the calculator that you just said 1 and 1/2. Now we're going to hit the division sign, and we're going to hit 3, fraction bar, 1, fraction bar, 2. And on the calculator, you'll see 3, 1, 2. Then you hit your equal sign. And you should get 3/7. Is that the correct answer?
Yes.
Does everyone understand what to do? Yes. Try it.
Okay.
Try it to make sure you understand it. Okay, so let's do a couple of other problems with you. just to make sure you're well prepared for tonight's homework. So what if I gave you something like this? H over 3 equals negative 2. When you have the variable in the numerator and a number in the denominator, and you have to find out what the variable is, technically what you are doing is you are multiplying both sides of the equation by positive 3. Whoever's in the denominator, if the variable's in the numerator, you're multiplying by 3 and you get h equals negative 6. This problem could also be done like this. You just multiply those two numbers, h equals negative 6. H over 3 is the same thing as saying 1/3 h equals negative 6, and we just did a problem like that, right? So h would be negative 6 divided by 1/3. Are you with me? Yes? Okay. Anybody have a question? All right, I changed the problem here. I apologize. Let me correct that so that we don't mess anybody up. So give me 1 second. And it should have been 1/3 h equals negative 2 to keep the same problem for you guys. So let me fix it. And I'll fix it again. H equals negative 2 divided by 1/3, which would be negative 2 times 3 over 1, or negative 6. I would tend to think that most people are going to choose either of these two methods. Yes? Is that how y'all were taught last year? Yeah. Okay, very good. Okay, I'm trying to look to see if there's anything else. Okay, we can do one with a decimal. Let's do one with a decimal, and then I think we covered everything. Negative 2.4p equals 7.2. So, class, who's kissing p? Negative 2.4 is kissing p. So my variable p I've isolated. I'm going to divide everything on both sides by negative 2.4. And p would equal 7.2 divided by negative 2.4. Watch your negative signs. Don't lose them. And tell me what you get for an answer. What do you get? Negative 3. Is that correct? Okay. Does anyone have a question? Okay. Are you sure? I want you guys to look at your homework for this evening, please. So look at your homework packet for this evening. So we are on page 2 in our packet. The homework for this evening says at the top, skills practice 2.2. And you are doing 1 through 29 odd and 30 through 34 all. So if I were you, I would write that right on the top of that page. And that way, you don't even have to go back and check the board. You don't have to go back and check RenWeb. It's right here. Remember, all work goes on notebook paper. Now, I only gave you the odds, except for the last few, because I wanted you to have some practice with fractions, okay? So I want to make myself clear, and I want to say one thing to you guys. That way, when you go back to study for our test, which is next Friday, you have ample problems that you can pick from to do, as well as problems in the notes itself. Okay, I want to do one more problem with you just in case you see it in tonight's homework. So let me give you something like this. A over 25 equals 1 over 4. A over 25 equals 1 over 4. Again, you want to isolate the variable. So what do you have to do to both sides of the equation to isolate the variable? Multiply by 25. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, and we're going to deal with this, we're going to spend a lot of time, but when you have two fractions, fractions or two ratios that are equal to each other, they are called an equal proportion. An equal proportion. To solve an equal proportion, you cross multiply. You cross multiply. So if you need to cross multiply, this is what you would do. 4a equals 25. Divide each side by 4, and a equals 25 over 4. You can leave it like that, or you could say 6 1/4. Are there any questions at all? I think I've covered everything that you might run into tonight. I have confidence that you would all know what to do with 25, to multiply both sides by 25, but the other option again is, if you remember from last year, solving equal proportions. Okay, this concludes our lesson for today. So thank you for being with us. Have a blessed weekend.